Peace, peace, peace. What's going on? This is Devin, Wellness Initiative. I ain't doing one of these videos in a very, 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 very long time, and I just wanted to, take a minute. I've been dealing with some issues, trying to get right, trying to get back to my usual routine, and yeah, I'm excited to say that I'm feeling much, much better. I was dealing with some health stuff. Glad to say I'm feeling much, much better, feeling good, feeling energized. So now we're about to discuss the Bible. Um, Actually one of my favorite books. Even though I don't follow any religion, I do enjoy studying spiritual manuscripts because I believe that encoded in those spiritual manuscripts is very practical information, but also mystical symbolism that can help us elevate our spirituality to a higher level. So I want to talk about the book of Genesis, or as I refer to it as the book of Gene Isis. Why do I call it Gene Isis? Because I believe that the symbolism in the beginning of the book of Genesis that talks about the creation of the world, I believe that symbolism is about the life being formed, the human life being formed inside the womb. I believe that the symbols and the images used are about the formation of the embryo in the womb, becoming a fetus, and being born. And I don't think I know it's not meant to be taken literally. The Bible was never intended to be taken as a literal text or a literal book. It was intended to be highly symbolic. Hold on, let me get this full screen going. It was intended to be symbolic. It was intended to always be true, but not literal. The Bible was intended to be true, but not literal. That's better. The Bible was intended to be true and not literal. So once you have something that is true and not literal, something that's always true, it's going to speak to something within us. It's going to speak to something on a much, much, much deeper level than just telling us stories about the creation of the world. It's telling you the story about the creation of you, as above, so below. So the stories about the creation of reality are the stories about the creation of us. Since we are a reflection of God and God is the ultimate reality. So the story in the book of Genesis or Gene Isis is about us. So gene, in the sense of our genetics being transmitted from our parents and our forebears, and all those centuries of information being transmitted in our genes when we're being formed in the womb. But also Isis, because Isis was the goddess of childbirth, and she was the goddess of magic. And the formation of the child in the womb is a form of, it's a mystical experience. It's a magical experience. It's an experience that in many ways to this day we still don't fully completely understand. We don't understand how consciousness is bestowed upon a creature. We don't know what consciousness really is or what really generates it. And so it's mystical. We know the process of how a child is physically formed, but how that physical form comes to life, how the breath of life goes into the child, we don't understand that. We don't know that. So it's a mystical experience. So what I want to start off with, I want to go through the processes in the Bible, what the Bible says and how it relates to the formation of a child. Now, first of all, in the book of Genesis, it begins with the spirit of God over the deep. The spirit of God moved over the deep. What does that mean? Well, it means that God's spirit or his breath was flowing over the waters. So before God even formed reality, there was already water there. So how can water already exist before God formed reality? Because this story is not literal. Before God formed the universe, before there was a sun, God had water. And it didn't even say that God created the water. It said the water was already there. So that lets you know that what we're looking at is not literal science, that what it is symbolism. So the symbolism of the spirit of God moving over the water, or the breath of God moving over the water, that symbolism shows you that the breath of God, or the energy of life, that divine spark, is flowing over the water that exists inside the womb. The water that is inside the woman, the water that is the woman, because our bodies are 70% water. So the woman symbolizes water, and her water gives birth to life. So the water that's already there within her is the water that's going to bring life forth into the universe. So the Spirit of God moved and flowed over the water. That's the Spirit of God, the breath of life that we all have within us, that is inside the woman, that is our divine inheritance. So as that breath of God flows over the water in the book of Genesis, it's flowing over the water within the womb of the woman. Next, God says, "Let there be light." That is the next step. Now, why is that interesting? Well, God created light. And when he created light, that was the first step to creating reality itself. Why is that important? Because light is how we come forth into being. People don't understand that. People don't know that. But as I was researching this, I realized that when the sperm and the egg come together, there's zinc in the sperm, calcium in the egg. And when those two chemicals come together, the zinc and the calcium inside the egg come together, they make a spark of light. They create a spark of light. So when God says, "Let there be light," and there's light created in the heavens, in that realm where the water already is awaiting, that's the spark of life, the spark of light that is formed when the sperm and the egg come together. And when the spark of life, when the sperm and the egg come together, that creates a new reality in that realm of the waters of the womb. So you have the waters of the womb, you have the breath of God, and you have that spark of light. Let there be light. That is the creation of the child. At that moment of climax, that moment of ejaculation, when a man ejaculates inside of a woman, the ejaculate goes to the egg, the sperm goes into the egg, boom, you have light. It is a chemical explosion that happens inside the womb of the woman. That light illuminates the womb of the woman, lights up the woman on the inside. It is an explosion of chemicals, an explosion that takes place as genes are being transmitted from one family tree to another family tree. And that explosion, that spark of light, is the creation of reality, the creation of consciousness here in this realm. That is the light. That is the Promethean torch of consciousness. That is the Promethean torch of knowledge. And it all begins inside the watery darkness of a woman's womb. She is the holder of that reality. She is heaven's gate. And within her is that spark of light that brings forth light. That spark of light with the breath of God, with the word of God. In the beginning was the word was God, the word was with God, and the word was God. Well, let there be light. That is a word, that is a vibration. And that vibration exists within the woman as life is coming into being. Everything has a vibration. Even that process, if you have a spark of light that happens due to a chemical explosion inside of a woman's body that illuminates the inside of this woman and changes her biochemistry, it's going to have a vibration. And when things move in harmony with the appropriate vibrations, that brings forth life. Even now, people are exploring the idea that vibrations and sounds can heal or make you sick. At one point in time, when I was really deep into my meditation on my spiritual journey, I couldn't listen to certain music. Certain music I would listen to and I would feel like I was being sick. The vibration of it was making me sick because I was so spiritually sensitive at that point. You know, I was meditating and going to such deep meditation trances that when I would walk around or hear certain vibrations, it would immediately make me physically ill. And inside that woman's body, that word of God, that powerful vibration that brings forth life, that vibration is the vibration of eternity existing within her. Eternity from one form to another being passed down from the father to the mother to the seed, and that seed passes down their genetics. The entire history of the human species is in our genes and it exists within that light, within that spark of light, within that vibration that happens at that moment. That wordless word that brings forth life within a woman, right? Next, God makes the sky. Now that part is very, very interesting. The Bible describes it as God creating a firmament where the stars are, where where the heavens are, right? He made the sky on that day. Now, the sky kind of coincides with the creation of the mind. And the next step in the formation of the child, you'll see that the nervous system begins to form. So the central nervous system begins to form, the spinal cord, the nerves, and the brain begin to form. So just like the sky is above, your brain is above. Your brain can elevate you to higher levels of consciousness. Your brain is the housing of the mind. Your central nervous system once it's properly trained, can help you to elevate to higher levels. So just like God created the sky, he gave us the tools to ascend to higher levels of consciousness. That's the symbolism of this story. The story of the heavens being formed in 7 days, the stories of you being formed, and seven stages of development, seven being the number for God, seven being the number for completion, seven being the number for divinity. That's why God made you on 6 days. On the seventh day, he rested. On the seventh day, he ceased his activity for us to begin our activity so that we could ascend to higher levels and be with him. But first, he had to make the sky. He had to make the sky. This is your sky. They say the sky is the limit. This is the limit. This is the sky. The sky is the limit, meaning the mind's the limit. The mind is the only thing that can fathom what's up there. And when I say up there, I don't mean in a spooky sense. I just mean as far as elevation of the self. That's why when you read the book of Genesis, it talks about the tree of knowledge. What's the tree of knowledge? The tree of knowledge is the central nervous system. But I'm gonna break that down. I'm gonna break that down in a different video. But moving on to the next one, dry land. Next, God created dry land. So when God created the dry land, that's the stage at which the baby develops heart, which pumps the blood, the face, the arms, and the legs. So now the baby is starting to form a body in this this ocean of natal waters. So just like you will see dry land kind of rising up above the ocean, you will see his body begin to form, or her body begin to form and rise up through the surface of the waters. The dry land is the body, the arms and the legs. The arms and the legs are synonymous to the land. So this child's body begins to formulate in the waters. It begins to take physical form. Now, this is a very mystical process. This is a very mystical process to see a child's body begin to take form out of nothingness. It started from light. You got to remember, life started from light. It started from raw genetic material, and there was a spark of light. And from that spark of light, somehow, some way, through some mystical process, a physical body began to form. It began to take shape. The nutrients from the woman's body began to formulate a physical body for a child. That's why they say she has to eat for two, because the chemicals and the calories that she's taking in, the nutrients that she's taking in, began to formulate and make a baby. So just like God made man from the dust, the woman's body is making a child within her. So divinity exists within the woman. That breath of God exists within the woman. That's why a lot of people in the conscious community were running around saying that the Black woman is God. There would be no life without her. This mystical process of a human body being formed is something that's so magical. That's why I call this Gene Isis. The goddess of magic and childbirth has to govern over something like formation of a human body within another human body, within the waters that exist within her, within the frame of her body. Somehow, some way, that energy, that spirit is being formed in her, and the breath of life comes from her. As she's breathing in, that breath of life is going into the child. She's breathing into the breath of life, so she's playing the role of God now. And just like God created the dry land, she's creating the dry land within her own body. And that's what life is all about. Life is about us elevating ourselves and taking on the role of God, not just praying to God, not just submitting to God, but after a while, we begin to take on the role of God. But that might frighten some people who might hear that. It might frighten you when I say you must take upon yourself the role of God. But as a woman who brings life into the world, you have to take upon yourself the role of righteousness, eating the right foods, being considerate of what you're putting in your body, being considerate of how you live, being considerate of how you think. Because that process of bringing life into the world, if you're a person who wants to bring healthy life into the world, it restricts you and gives you a standard that is going to purify you. It's going to purify you and make you a better person. You have to become a better person in order to bring healthy life into the world. If you're a person who indulges in alcohol, you're going to have to stop to bring life into the world. If you smoke weed, you're going to have to stop to bring life into the world. If you use drugs, you're going to have to stop to bring life into the world, healthy life into the world. All the negative habits that you have, you're going to have to put them aside. If you eat unhealthy foods, you like eating too many hot Cheetos and candy and Starburst, and drinking soda and energy drinks and coffee. You're gonna have to stop all of that in order to bring healthy life into the world. So you take upon yourself the role of God, purifying yourself so that you can become closer to the divine, so that you can protect this life that's growing inside of you. You take upon yourself of playing the role of God if you want to bring healthy life into the world. Within you is the dry land that God created, but now you are creating it through your actions, through your thoughts, and through your word. Now, the in the beginning was the word. The word was with God, and the word was God. The word is with you. The word is within you now. You're playing the role of God to that child, and therefore your actions must be purified. Your thoughts must be purified. What you do must be purified at all times. The next one, God makes the sun and moon. This one is very interesting. When God created the sun and the moon and the sky, he already created light. So that goes to show you that this is highly symbolic because we can't have light on the planet without the sun. So if God created light in the universe before he created the sun, then of course, obviously, this is symbolic. It's not literal. It's not literal. What is this? What does it mean that God created the sun and the moon? Well, we know that throughout human history, people have always anthropomorphized the sun and the moon. The sun was always masculine, or almost always masculine in ancient cultures. The moon was always or almost always feminine. So when it says God made the sun and the moon, that means that at this stage during the development of the child, it starts to develop sex organs. So now you know whether, or you begin to see whether it's masculine or feminine, whether it has masculine energy or feminine energy. At this stage, you begin to see it turn into whether it's going to be a boy or a girl. And I know a lot of people believe that gender is fluid, but gender is not fluid. Belief is fluid. Gender is not. Just like the sun is not fluid and the moon is not fluid. So at this stage, you see the child begin to develop sex organs. Still don't look fully formed yet, but the energy of masculinity or the energy of femininity begins to play its part as a part of the universe and as above, so below. Just like the universe has masculine energy and feminine energy, it has to balance order, chaos. It has to balance ma'at and isfet. It has to balance order and entropy. It has to balance masculine and feminine. The universe is a balancing act. Human life is a balancing act. And at this stage, you begin to see whether your son is going to be a sun, or your son is going to be or your child, your daughter is going to be a moon. And what does it mean to have a son who is the sun? Well, the sun sheds light. The sun is very aggressive, but the sun gives us life. That's what a man is supposed to do. I think that's why masculinity in our culture has been lost. Manhood has been lost. Because though the sun is very, very powerful and the sun could be very, very cruel, the sun is also a life giver. The sun was seen as a god to our ancient ancestors because it would help them to grow crops and grow food. It kept them healthy, kept them purified. The sun gave us the boon and the gift of sustenance. And we need the sun. The sun needs to touch our skin to help regulate our bodies. So the sun is a life giver. And a lot of young boys are raised to believe that they're not supposed to give life, only take it. The moon takes the light from the sun so that it can shine and be powerful at night. So they work together. There's no competition between the sun and the moon. We can't exist without the sun. We really can't exist without the moon either. The moon reflects the light from the sun so that we can see in the darkness. The woman is the one who helps us to see in the darkness with her intuition and her wisdom. She gives us knowledge. She gives us magic. That's why the moon is always seen as a goddess of magic, because the woman has the magic to bring life into the world. The man can't do that. Women have intuition. Men can't do that. Women's brains can multitask. When I was married, I would go into a room with my wife, and I would be focused on one thing. Her brain can multitask. She's noticing 8 different details. She's noticing who's looking at me wrong, who's hating, who's plotting. She would shed light with her intuition. So the sun needs the moon needs the sun. And they have to learn how to collaborate with each other, but they can only learn how to collaborate with each other by learning their true roles. That's why I don't believe in the idea of teaching young boys to be more feminine. I don't believe in the idea of teaching young girls to be more masculine. You look at the Black community, you have a whole bunch of masculine, unhappy women and a whole bunch of feminized, unhappy males. I don't believe it's possible to tell somebody to play a different role from the role that's bestowed upon them by God and expecting them to be able to function at full capacity. Next, the creatures that live in the sea. So next, God formed the creatures that live in the sea, and this is the stage in which the child's internal organs began to form and it began to work. So in the sea of the child's own body, in the sea of the child's developing form, the sea of the woman's fluids and the waters that are inside the mother, the child began to have his own internal organs. He starts to form in a way so that he can become his own person. And this is an interesting phase because this is an interesting phase not only during the development of a child inside the womb, but an interesting phase when the child gets older. When children get older and they become their own people, and they want to travel out into the world and see things and do their own thing. And as they're preparing for that, that must be a scary time. But at this point inside the woman's body, the child begins to form his own organs, preparing to be able to sustain his own life, becoming closer and closer and closer to being born, and closer to preparation for the day where the child becomes fully independent. But before they can become fully independent and live on their own and go out into the world and make themselves successful and conquer the world, they have to be independent in a sense where they can sustain their own existence. The body has to become healthy. The internal organs have to work. Same thing when the child is developed enough to go out into the world and get a job. Everything has to be fully developed and formed internally before they go out into that world. Before the child is born, internal organs have to be formed and working. Before the child goes out into the world as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20, 21-year-old, the child has to be fully formed psychologically and emotionally. And that's the creatures that live in the sea, the internal organs, but also the internal workings of the mind. The creatures that live in the sea are the internal organs and the sea of blood of the child, but the internal thought processes of the child are just as important. And when the time comes, the child will be born. When the time comes, the adult will go out into the world. The next part, God creates man. At this point, the baby is fully formed. The baby is fully formed and it's a living being, and now it is simply waiting for the time to come for it to come into the world. And it comes into the world and it breathes the breath of life and it becomes a living soul, as it says in the Bible. God breathed the breath of life into man, and man became a living soul. He formed man from the dust of the earth. Well, we are all formed from the dust of the earth. The elements in our body come from the ground and come from the stars. So we are a bizarre combination of the divine and the earthly. Some of the elements in our body come from here on earth. The water in our body comes from the earth. The carbon in our body and the helium in our body come from above. The chemicals that exist within us come from above. So just like God breathed the breath of life into us, the heavens bestowed its gifts upon us so that we could live, and the earth bestowed its gifts upon us so that we could live. We're formed from the dust of the earth. And then somehow, some way, through some bizarre mystical process, these inanimate elements were put together in a way where there's a spark of life and we become living souls. That boggles my mind because nobody could figure out how that happens yet. As scientific as individuals are, as much as our science has advanced, we got AI, we got quantum physics, we got, you know, biophysics, still can't figure out how an inanimate set of elements can not only become alive, but become conscious of itself. How can consciousness fold in on itself and become aware of itself? How did carbon and all the other chemicals that came down from the stars one day just start walking around and thinking and strategizing and coming up with plans about what it's going to do for the future? How can the spark of life from man go into a woman, and they combine their genetics and their family history and millions of years of human evolution can all come together and coalesce in this life that is fully formed? It boggles the mind. And that's why you have to open your mind to possibility of everything, the possibility of magic, and embrace the mystical. You have to embrace the mystical because the shit is too big for science. Not saying science will never figure it out, but right now we don't have the science to fully figure this out yet. They're still struggling to figure it out, which is okay. That's where mysticism comes in. Mysticism allows us to embrace what we can't explain, embrace it as a reality, embrace it as a reality and accept it. That's what mysticism is. That's what mysticism is. That's why I'm a mystic man, in the words of Peter Tosh. All right. I am going to be out of here. Thank y'all for your time. Peace and blessings to everyone. I love y'all. I shall be back tomorrow. One.